Andy Johnson with a review of educational research. It is important that we become critical consumers of educational research, and when someone makes a research claim, it is important that we occasionally look at the study to see if we can make the conclusions based on the data in the study. This study is cited a lot. Torgesen, 2001, intensive remedial instruction for children with severe reading disabilities, immediate and long-term outcomes from two instructional approaches. There are some very good things about this study, and I'll take a look. It examined two types of intervention programs for students with severe reading disability. One was a Lindemood multi-sensory program, and the other was an embedded phonics program that they developed for this study. There was no control or comparison group, and you'll see why that's important in just a minute. But both approaches focused on explicit instruction of word identification skills. Now, at the forefront, they said, we acknowledge at the outset that the interventions examined in this study may not be immediately practical for broad-scale implementation in public schools, and you'll see why that is. The research questions: can either intervention accelerate reading growth enough to bring students with severe reading disabilities into the average range? Would either one of these work? Are there significant differences in the effectiveness of the two instruction approaches? So we need to look carefully. The first one was called the Auditory Discriminatory In-Depth Program. It's the Lindemood program. They identified that as a multi-sensory approach. And an embedded phonics program, a program that the researchers developed for this study. Now, both groups received 76 hours of instruction, had two 50-minute sessions each day, 5 days a week, for 8 weeks, by trained instructors or tutors. Instruction was one-on-one and substituted for instruction in a resource room. Now you can see why this may not be practical for public schools. You can't have one-on-one trained tutors for two 50-minute sessions every day. All right? But this research looked at the effects of two types of intensive one-on-one instruction or interventions. Now remember, there were no control or comparison groups here. That's important. There were 60 children in this study with severe reading disabilities. They were randomly assigned to one of two groups. And again, no control or comparison group. The ages 8 and 10, they were previously identified as learning disabled. You can see the characteristics of each group, 30 in each group. They gave pre- and post-intervention measures as well. They looked at 1- and 2-year follow-ups to see the stability of the gains. Very interesting here. And you can see pre, post, 1 year, 2 year of the two groups. And you can stop and look at this in depth if you wish. The results: there was no difference in the two approaches compared. And again, they compared just these two approaches. Both approaches showed significant gains. Both approaches were successful in bringing children into the average range. That is important. Both approaches showed relative stability and gains over time. Again, that is important as well, significant. There was no control or comparison group here, and you'll see why that's important. But to answer the question, can either intervention accelerate reading growth? Yes, both were successful. Are there differences in the two? No significant differences here. However, keep in mind what we're comparing. We're only comparing two types of intensive instruction. Intensive instruction is good, all right? But again, they said, we acknowledge at the outset, the intervention examined may not be immediately practical. Okay, that is important. That is important. But from this study, we can infer that an intensive one-on-one intervention with specially trained tutors using explicit instruction and word identification skills can be effective for both short-term and long-term growth in reading with students with severe reading disabilities. Both approaches were successful. But it doesn't prove anything. It doesn't prove that the Lindemood approach or embedded phonics is more effective than other approaches or more effective than no approach at all. There was no control or comparison groups. Again, both groups received a whole lot of instruction, two 50-minute sessions each day for 8 weeks, one-on-one with a trained tutor. That's what was effective. We don't know how a similar group of students in a gen ed classroom or a resource room setting would have fared. We don't know. And again, this was substituted for their regular instruction. We don't know this. Questions for the future. Would other types of interventions of similar intensity and duration yield similar results? If students had intensive independent reading twice a day for 50 minutes over 8 weeks, would we see the same results? Or a comprehensive intervention program, or intervention program focusing on developing the 3 cueing systems, or a language approach, or other? We don't know. It just compared these 2 types of approaches. And again, it's important that we become critical consumers of educational research and that we make claims based on what the data, and we don't go beyond the data.